Welcome to the Aldrich. I'm happy to report that with the pandemic and the state's recommendations, this is the first event we've had, and the only reason we're having it is that it's outdoors. And the governor's recommendations that performers, and we're performers today, could be unmasked. We have to be 12 feet away from you guys, and you guys should be 6 feet away from each other. But so we got a beautiful day here, and before we get started, I just wanted to say a little bit about the context of Sean's work. Is that last October we opened an exhibition here, Weather Report, which was a group exhibition, 21 artists, all of whose work thinks about or deals with the Earth's atmosphere and weather phenomena. And at the opening in October, we actually did a performance of this piece, although the work was actually in the lobby and the balloons went up in the courtyard here. And we wanted to do it again before the show closed. And the show was going to close originally on March 29th. And of course, the pandemic hit, the museum closed down, and there was no performance of it. So all of the exhibitions in the museum pretty much were frozen in place during the pandemic, and they're going to be closing now in August. So we have this opportunity actually to perform it one more time before the exhibition closed. And Sean came down here today, or yesterday actually, from Providence, Rhode Island. And just a little bit about him. I met Sean last year. Interestingly enough, I went up to do crits at RISD, at the Rhode Island School of Design, in the glass department. And I was introduced to him over coffee and I think a bagel in the local bagel shop. And we got to talking about what each of us did, and I mentioned this project I was working on about weather, and realized that Sean has actually did a piece that actually related to this subject in a really interesting way. And one goal of this exhibition was to find artists who really explored weather in really, really different ways and took it off in different directions. And I hadn't really thought about weather balloons. I hadn't really thought about actually the show involving the sky in a direct way, but also the fact that this work, as you'll see, talks about nuclear war and nuclear weapons, brought a whole other level of meaning into the exhibition about the nature of nuclear weapons. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but just a little bit about Sean. He got his BFA from the Massachusetts College of Art, his MFA from the Rhode Island School of Design, and he's exhibited his work quite widely. And as you'll see, a lot of these venues are in Japan, which has a direct bearing on this work. He's shown at the Nagoya University of the Arts in Japan, the Chrysler Museum in Richmond, Virginia, not in Japan, Koko Laboratory in Akita, Japan, Nizayama Forest Art Museum in Toyama, Japan, and the Haystack Mountain School of Crafts in Deer Isle, Maine, among many other places. And he's currently an assistant professor of glass at RISD. Now, one thing is that I'm hesitant to call Sean a glass artist. And you know, when you call someone a glass artist, you have preconceptions about what they do, and especially calling someone a glass blower. But I think you'll find in this talk today that what I find fascinating about Sean and his work is actually that when you think of glass blowing, we always focus on glass. We don't think about the blowing part of it. And Sean's work focuses as much on the breath, or perhaps more so on the breath than it does on the material of glass. And just to illustrate this, last summer he was in residence up at the Wasaic Project up in the Hudson Valley, artist residency, and I visited him up there, and what he was doing, he was sealing his breath in plastic bags to send to other glass blowers so they could use his breath to blow glass objects, which I thought was fascinating. So I guess let's start. This whole piece came about because of living in Japan for a while. Let's talk a little bit about your experience in Japan.
Yeah, in 2010 I got invited to teach on a 4-year contract at this all glass art institute called the Toyama City Institute of Glass Art, and it's on the main island of Japan in the west, right on the Sea of Japan, then kind of northwest. And you know, I started thinking. My wife is Japanese. Now my daughter is half Japanese and half American, and I was thinking of you know, just some shared cultural histories that maybe both of our cultures have shared. You know, my grandfather fought fought against the Japanese in World War II, and just trying to think about what that means and how things change. And I went to the Hiroshima Peace Museum in Hiroshima, right where the atomic bomb was detonated, and was really moved by it. And so one of the things I didn't realize before, because I hadn't looked into it too much, was just that I was really taken aback by the calculations that had to go in to figure out the most devastating effect the bomb could have. They figured it should be detonated at 600 meters, which is about 1,800 feet. And I just thought about just all that comes with that. And I was wondering about, times have changed so much in terms of the two cultures being really friendly with each other. And so I was trying to think of something I could make that kind of talked to that a little bit, but that had a little bit more positive, something that was created. I like the idea of something rising to 1,800 feet to create something, as opposed to falling to 1,800 feet to destroy something. I wanted something that was kind of temporal in nature, something so like you'll see this lasts for a little bit. It happens quickly. I wanted a gesture, like kind of a toast. That's why I'm using the goblet. And so, that's where it started from.
So Sean blew this goblet, and you'll see it's in 3 pieces.
Yeah.
And it's not the typical sort of work you do. I mean, it's
Right.
like when you think of a glass blower, you might think of an object like this.
Yep. Yeah, and so I don't know, just other interests I have, or things coming together, animating things. Think about this like kind of like a puppet. As a glass blower, I love making goblets. I really don't like using them that much. I don't like even looking at them that much. I think they're strange objects. I think there's a hierarchy to the goblet, which is strange. But then I started shifting a thought about it. I thought about the cup as a way of floating the drink off the table. That became more interesting to me. So this way of kind of creating a narrative about what the goblet might mean. But as a maker, it's just such a thrill to make them. And it's a real challenge of skill. And to make goblets is a way to kind of keep your skills up. And it's something I love doing. So finding another way to use them that's not so functional or not so traditional is always something that I'm interested in.
Now, there's one other piece that Sean has done that I think is really relevant to this project, and you want to talk about your bringing the glass filament into the sky, which is just as fascinating.
Yeah, and so I've done a project. I've done it a few times now, but it has to be in the proximity of a glass furnace somewhere. But you can pour a bunch of molten glass into a glass bowl that I made. So I make a big, thick glass bowl, pour molten glass into it. And then I have balloons similar to this. It could be, I actually just use normal household balloons, like kids' balloons, and they're tethered to a copper wire. And the copper wire adheres to the molten glass. I dip it into the molten glass and let it go, and it pulls up this, it feeds a thread up into the sky of glass, and it pulls from this pool. It's like pulling a spider's silk out of a spider or something until it cools. And once it cools, it just kind of moves and it tethers. It's like it's like a fiber optic, a single strand of fiber optic, but it's a dumb fiber optic. It's just one piece of glass. It doesn't refract the light the same way. But I like this idea of this really simple strand, and it can go up about 200 feet before it cools, and it just sways. It's got this flex. And you'll see that a similar thing will happen with this, because we did a test this morning that it was really beautiful. When the line gets up and it's fully extended, there's a moment where you lose the visuality of the line, except for where the sun hits it, maybe 1,000 feet up, you'll see a streak of light. Well, that was amplified with that string of glass that goes up. It would just flash when it caught the sun. It was this amazing phenomenological experience, and I like that it's such a simple gesture.
Now, one thing, just going back to Hiroshima, of course, that the heat of an atomic explosion will fuse glass and actually turn sand into glass.
Yeah.
And if you've ever been out to White Sands in New Mexico, where they did the testing of the first atomic bombs, a Trinity explosion, there's actually sand there that has been turned into glass by the heat of a nuclear explosion. The other thing, in terms of, and this is something I talked to Sean about early on, is that we've forgotten, in all the talk about climate change, we've forgotten about the nature of what was defined back in the early 80s, nuclear winter. If you remember, during the height of kind of when the Reagan years with Star Wars and all of that, there was this speculation if there was a global nuclear war, the amount of particulate matter put in the atmosphere would actually chill the planet down to the point we would have something called nuclear winter. So, you know, it seems like human beings, we have this capacity to both freeze the planet and heat the planet with our misdeeds and on two extremes, and how fragile the atmosphere is. And I think ultimately, you know, one thing about this is the fragility of the glass, I think for me speaks about the fragility of the atmosphere itself.
Yep.
So, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
So afterwards we'll have some questions and conversations about it, but we'll see. And you know, the weather report about winds being light and variable, we'll see today how light, they are light but variable certainly. So
yeah, the test, we did a test this morning and it went pretty well.
Okay, let's do it.
So, all right, I'll need those scissors, thank you. And I'll need that, thank you. Richard, can I get you just to hold this, let's see, just to hold this for a second. I should hold the balloons. Just cut right there.
Cut the wrong one.
You got that?
Yeah.
Okay. Cut this off of here. All right. Give these back to you, Chris. Put these here. Thank you. Give me this. All right, so I'm just gonna guide it for the first two. Okay, you ready? Do we need a countdown?
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, it's going faster than the earlier. Go on this side. See if I can guide it. Trying to avoid those trees right there.
You're
Okay, it's getting ready.
I don't think it's going to descend today.
Nope. So it's interesting to look at that. Now you have a visual of roughly where, you know, it's a little difference minus a couple hundred feet, but roughly where that, like where the bomb was detonated.
It's rather hypnotic just watching the balloons themselves up there. So this has been performed in Japan, in Seattle,
and
now
here.
and here.
Yep.
The 3 locations.
Yep. This is the most like just simple, beautifully. You know, it's come together pretty rapidly in other places, and this is the best one, I think.
So
I think the
there must
setting
be-
is gorgeous too.
There must be some questions here from someone. Yes.
Yeah.
So would you say that it's like, what is it a toast to?
It's just a toast to maybe a new future, or you know, some sort of, you know, I use 2 balloons. You know, it's not specifically to represent the two countries, but maybe to represent 2 beings that that might be trying to, you know, like they're kind of like whirling around with each other, but it's this kind of, you know, maybe to positivity and something about getting along, and you know. But I know it's a, you know, initially when I conceived of it, I thought of it of going up, and then over the course of a few days coming, you know, slowly coming back down, and this idea of like understanding that there's some tenuousness to, and also some temporality to that, to most peaceful situations and relationships. Yeah.
So one thing, of course, Sean is dealing with right now is how does one teach working with glass when teaching is remote at RISD? And I think that's a challenge for people teaching visual arts right now.
Yeah.
When the semester starts up, how is that's going to be impact the students?
I mean, we're actually, right now we're leaning towards a hybrid model. And so the studio courses are, as of now, set to be taught in person, but really de-densified. So instead of having 12 students in a hot glass casting course, I'll have 5. And then I'm actually going to have 7, but 5 will be in the shop at a time, and 2 will be prepping molds in another room or something. I was just telling Sybil, you know, in terms of glass blowing, we've canceled glass blowing for this semester because we usually put your mouth on a pipe, and you share, you know, you're sharing your air and saliva. But there's a guy in Seattle, Fred Metz, who's an equipment maker, and he made a hand pump that can actually attach to the blowpipe. Might be able to use that to inflate. It looks like it works pretty well. It changes the dynamics of how you move, but it might work as a way to eliminate it, eliminate using breath, being able to wear masks. Yeah.
So, any more questions? I just want to thank Pete Stewart today, our videographer, but also Hokan Gas Company. Many of you have propane gas from Hokan. Is that there's evidently a worldwide helium shortage, and they weren't taking any new customers. And when we explained what we were doing, Hokan gave us a tank of helium, saying, "All right, you're special. Get a tank of helium, despite the shortage."
Yeah, it's great.
Well, thank you all for coming, and certainly walk around the museum if you just got here, if you haven't
Yeah.
done so already. And our next opening, we're not having opening receptions, but the next series of shows opens on September 20th with Genesis Bellinger and Frank Stella, including some very, very large, spectacular sculptures of Frank Stella that will be outdoors here in the sculpture garden. If you're familiar with the museum, there were some works out here that actually have disappeared in the last week, and we started installing the Stella show outdoors at the end of August, actually. So thank you all for coming, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Richard. Thanks for having me. It's been it's been such a pleasure to be to show at this museum. I've been a fan of it for a long time. So
Great,
yeah, thank you.